So, good afternoon, Christopher Nevill. Welcome back. What are we
Thank
talking
you.
about today?
Well, it's something that goes way back into my childhood. And I'll tell you the story very briefly. When I was in my mid-teens, 14 or 15, we lived in Pietermaritzburg. And opposite us, it's a nice neighborhood. Opposite us, there was a family with two teenage sons, and they were about 17 or 18. In other words, I was a snot-nosed little brat. At 14, the difference between 14 and 18 is huge. But I knew them. And one day, completely out of the blue, they invited me to a party. And I was quite shattered. I mean, hello. These grown-up boys were actually inviting me to come and meet their friends, and there were going to be girls there. Hello. Those very strange creatures called girls. So I went. And to say that I was out of my depth was putting it mildly. But I did my best. The one thing that I was very determined not to do, because I didn't know my left foot from my right foot, was to dance. And in those days, you danced. You didn't stand on one side of the room and shake everything, and your partner stood on the other side of the room and shook it back. You held the girl, and the girl held you, and you danced. But I thought, no, I can't do that. So I made myself in charge of and some of you out there will recognize what I'm talking about. I made myself in charge of the music. And the music in those days wasn't on a cell phone, and it wasn't even on a tape. It was on discs. And you had to change the disc every now and again. And there was a record player. So I put myself in charge of that. And I was breathing a sigh of relief, watching how the other young people were having fun. And I was having fun in my own way. And I would change the record from time to time and put on different types of dancing, which we're going to talk about today. And eventually, a girl came over to me. All I remember of her was that she was very pretty. And she said, "Come, let's dance." And I said, "No, I can't dance." And she said, "Of course you can dance." I said, "No, I can't dance." But she was very persuasive, like you women can be. And you get us men doing all sorts of things about which we are not too sure. So we went on to the dance floor, which was just a cleared space in our neighbor's lounge. And of course, I spent most of my time on top of her feet because I didn't have the faintest idea of what I was doing. But she was very patient. But after a while, I escaped and I went back to playing the music. In other words, turning the records over and choosing a record so that other people could. She came back and said, "Come on, let's dance." And I said, "No, I'm okay." And I must have been quite unpleasant about it, I suppose, because she wandered off and found somebody else to dance with. But one thing was very clear. Because of that experience, which was really very painful, I'm determined to learn how to dance. And the very next day, I went into the town, Pietermaritzburg, and I found a dance studio. It was actually run by a great big bear of a man, Abe Liebenberg. I even remember his name. And I enrolled for dancing. And I learned what in those days we called dancing: cha-cha, waltz, foxtrot, quick-step, tango, where you actually took a hold of the girl. Today you call it long arm. And took hold of a girl, and she took hold of you, and you moved in time with the music. And I very, very quickly learned that I had to be intensely aware of what my partner was doing. And I had to be intensely aware, allow her to be intensely aware of what I was doing. And most of all, and this was the personal bit, and I only recognized this some years ago, of what an important personal lesson it was. Because my feet had to know exactly where my head was. The relationship between where my head was and what my feet were doing was very important. And vice versa. My head had to be very aware of what my feet were doing. And so it is today. That level of awareness that was part of dancing. I mean, I don't know if any of you have recently watched some of the old footage of that wonderful American dancer called Fred Astaire, and another one who's also brilliant at it is Gene Kelly. And watch them carefully. Their head knows exactly where their feet are at any moment in time. Their feet knows exactly where their head is at any moment in time, because you must maintain balance. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to lead your partner. Of course, one of the great myths was that it was up to the man to lead. Yeah. I have an idea that the next time a man leads, it might not be the very first time, but it certainly will be the second time. Because essentially, when I think back on it, the woman who led, with all the subtleness and grace and beauty that a woman is capable of. And I think it's a very sad reflection on our modern society that we don't dance this way anymore. You go onto the floor and your partner, why is she a partner? It could be anybody, stands over there, Dardu, and shakes everything that she's got. And you stand over here and also shake everything that you've got. And we call it dancing. And I have an idea that this is where too many of our relationships are these days. All relationships, international relationships, personal relationships, business relationships, that we have very little idea of what we are doing. In other words, the relationship between our feet and our head. We have effectively no knowledge whatsoever of what our so-called partner is doing. What are they thinking? How are they moving? And then we call it relationship.
So how would you want to do it differently? For instance, with the relationship, you say that we thought that men used to lead, but then a man will have to know where the woman is going in any case, whether he leads or not, right? So I understand that, and that the bodies must move in unison. Does that mean in relationships that what we do should be done in unison, as you say, understanding where the other person is related to you?
Well, otherwise, how can you call it relationship?
Mm.
Are you going to mess it up from time to time? Of course, that's life. As I might have said to you before in other discussions, I will certainly say to you again in future discussions, one of the reasons why we are here, in my opinion, seems to be that we are designed to make mistakes. We are not designed to get it right. We are designed to make mistakes, then have an awareness of what we have done, and then to work very hard at doing it differently. Because it's only when you make a mistake that you create the opportunity for learning. Can you imagine if you always got it right?
Yeah, you wouldn't learn, right?
Then there would be no chance to learn.
Mm.
No chance for what we laughingly call these days growth. Don't like that word, growth. We're not cabbages, neither are we lettuces, nor are we carrots. But there's no chance for development. And that's a word I like, because in line with my philosophy that life will not give you something that you cannot handle, the implication behind that is that you are already pre-programmed to have the ability to deal with whatever life dishes up. You might need some advice. You might have to admit that you're wrong, but you are pre-programmed. Life will not give you something that you cannot handle. If you believe that life will give you something that you cannot handle, then you, with that belief system, are making life a hopeless process. So you might as well give up.
Yeah, of course.
There's no point in carrying on.
Yeah.
So we make mistakes, and it seems almost as though we're designed to do that, because it's only then that development can take place, and development, I like the old-fashioned photographic stuff. I used to take photographs on paper and then develop them, because the image was already there. In other words, the ability is in there. The ability to deal with whatever life is dishing up to you is already in there. What you must do is apply stuff to it, sometimes unpleasant. The chemicals used in any photographic studio are not nice. Don't drink them. Don't have a bath in them. They will not do you much good. But they have a wonderful, wonderful effect of they bring out, make. Sorry, there was an interrupted call that I had to get rid of.
You were saying that they bring out the picture.
That's what the chemicals do.
Yeah.
And that's what mistakes have the potential to do. Sadly, these days, what we're teaching our children is that what they're doing is wrong, with a cross, the most powerful negative symbol in one of the most powerful negative symbols that we have, or we tick it right. Well, ticking it right is okay if what you have just done happens to agree with the teacher. What I would like to see happen in our schools is, rather than marking it with a cross, is the use of the acronym. I've got as much chance of getting this right as flying to the moon. Not that I particularly want to fly to the moon, quite frankly, but I would like to see that when a child doesn't get it right, we don't mark it wrong. We call it WIP, work in progress. Because if the child has made an effort, given it a bash, put something down that might not meet the standard, but at least they're thinking. And if they're thinking, then there's a chance of development. So I like to go back to the dancing.
Yes. Could I ask a question or two, though?
Of course.
Okay, so you referred back to dancing with where you hinted that the woman also leads in a way, as you say, with the subtleties and so on. But it's not physically lead. Can you elaborate on that? Where we have this perception of men leading, but it's not necessarily as simple as that.
Yes. So do both parties need to lead? Yes, I mean, one of my also favorite little puzzles, and I see this when I go to gatherings of people. At no time on God's good earth will a man, and I suppose there always are times because there's always exceptions, but in general terms, at no time will a man make an advance to a woman until she makes it possible for him. And there are many ways in which you women do this. You flick your hair. You move one leg in front of the other. You push one breast out just a fraction. You flutter your eyelids. And until a man gets that permission that he may advance, very, very few men will. I'm surprised that I'm not. I suppose they're always the unconscious male who doesn't see that the door is actually closed, and then he wonders why he gets kicked in the crutch or in the kneecap.
Yes,
and
it happens.
What did I do? Well, you went into a place that you were not welcome. Whereas across a crowded room, lovely song that. A woman looks at a man and thinks, he's got potential. So she will then send a signal to say, you may come. You may come. And unless the man is totally unconscious, he will say, oh. And he'll go across to that lady and say to her, would you like a drink? If it's a social occasion. Or these days, you say to the girl, would you like to dance? And then she goes to one side of the floor and you stay on the other side of the floor and you shake, rattle, and roll. And we call it dancing. And our relationships.
In relationships, yes, that was my next thought.
And then our relationships are in exactly the same tatters. I don't know what the divorce rate is running here in the UK, but it's running at something like 6 or 7 out of 10.
Yeah, currently 7 out of 10.
Some 7 out of 10. There we go. How sad. How sad. And it's not because we are stupid. We're not. We just are not taught, not trained. Is dancing the only way that you can learn? No. There's all sorts of different ways that you can learn. But I think dancing is a very powerful way. Dancing in the way that I'm talking about dancing, where my head knows where my feet are, my feet knows where my head is, and I'm intensely aware of you, and vice versa. Then we can start to move to whatever tune life happens to be playing.
Wow.
Does that make it all easy and straightforward? Nay. Imagine if life was straightforward, if it was perfect.
It will certainly be much easier, though. But
I'm going to say something that is quite controversial. I think probably the closest thing that we have in our thing to hell on earth is the Garden of Eden. And I can see the Christian people that might be listening to me going, yes, I understand that. But can you imagine anything worse than waking up in a perfect world where there is nothing to do? Because everything is, so you wake up in the morning and think, what can I do today? Well, there's nothing to do because everything is perfect. Ye gods. That must be awful. There was a lovely joke doing the rounds some years ago, and you might have heard it before, about the man who was sitting in heaven and sitting on a pink cloud or whatever, green hill. and he was a bit bored. He'd been listening to these angels honing on for a long time, and he was a bit bored, and he thought that there must be something more to it than this. And just at that particular point in time, a pink cloud came floating past, and on it there was a party like you cannot believe. The music was playing, the liquor was flowing, the girls were beautiful, and everybody was having one hell of a good time. And he thought, oh man, that's where I've got to be. This is obviously where it is. I don't know what I'm doing here, just listening to these angels. So he took a run back, and he ran furiously and jumped and missed. And he fell down, 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 and crashed onto a very hard floor. And he sort of came to feeling a bit dazed, not quite knowing what's going on. And there was a great big black figure looming over him, pricking him with a pitchfork. And he said, where am I? And he says, where you wanted to be. And he says, no, but it wasn't like that. It was a party. That's where I wanted to be. And the big black figure looked at him and said, ah, my friend, that was the commercial. This is the reality.
Wow. Oh, that's funny and profound. Wow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
funny and profound.
Yeah, my other question, also relating to the dancing and so on, when you say you move in unison when you are acutely aware of where your partner is.
Otherwise, how can you move in unison?
I'm with you there. Yes, exactly. But with dancing, it's quite easy because we've practiced the steps, and you can sort of anticipate where people are in real life. We can anticipate, and I would compare that word anticipate to assume where that other person is. But you don't always know, and if there's no clear communication and no clear understanding of that person, how do you bridge that gap?
You can't.
Is it then just futile? Should you just give up and not dance?
Well, it depends. It depends. How badly do you want to dance? If you're not particularly interested, then stop. But that's not giving up. That's what I call surrender. Sweet surrender. When you give up, but give up consciously, say, no, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there will be a result. And life will not
else.
give you something. And life will not give you something you cannot handle.
Mm.
But just be aware of it, is that the result that you've got is what you created.
Sure.
Did the other person have something to do with it? Of course they did. But don't just point the finger at them. There's this lovely old-fashioned thing too that I talk about when I'm given the opportunity, is when you point a finger, there's three fingers pointing back.
Mm. That's true, right?
So when you point a finger and you say, but it's your fault, look at the three fingers pointing back.
Mm.
Is that tricky? Yes. Life is a tricky business. Right from the first time that we decide to come here and we go through that remarkably uncomfortable process of birth, where the body that we've chosen to inhabit has to negotiate some absolutely impossible situations. I mean, if we treated our animals the way that we treated our fetuses, if we treated our animals like that, we'd get head up for cruelty to animals. We have to negotiate impossibly small apertures. My mother always complained that I had a very big head. Yes, all right, stop the giggling, please. She was right, I do. I have apparently, I know when I try and buy hats, for example, I can very seldom find one that actually fits. So I must have been an absolute nightmare.
to give birth to.
Aish,
Oh, word.
aish.
Sure.
Of course, some people out there will say, well, you're still a nightmare. What's changed? Yeah. I hear that.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I think our time is running out. So thank you so much for this. This was so insightful with the dancing, and it is a light conversation to have about a very difficult and complex concept, relationships.
Yes.
The way you compare that makes it so much easier to understand and to see where the shortcomings are. So I do hope that the audience enjoyed this one. I'm pretty sure they will.
Yes, I like to think so too. And thank you for the nice things that you say. That's one of the things I like about you is you always say nice things about me. Take care.
Yes.
Have a wonderful day and chat soon.
You're so welcome.
Goodbye.
Have a lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.